The Senate chamber is filled with a heavy, almost suffocating silence. The cameras zoom in on the polished wooden desks, the high ceilings, the rows of anxious faces, all of them waiting. The tension in the air is palpable. On the left, a row of stoic senators sits in silence, their eyes trained on the center stage, where a battle of words is about to unfold. On the right, the media is ready to capture every moment, every detail of what promises to be a dramatic clash. Kamala Harris stands poised, calm, unwavering. Her presence fills the room, radiating confidence. She stands tall, a figure of dignity and resolve, her eyes locked on her opponent, Rand Paul. He's already leaning forward, his body language exuding arrogance and entitlement. There's a glint of self-assuredness in his eyes, but it's the kind of self-assurance that comes from privilege, not merit. The kind that says, I'm above this is all just a formality. As the tension grows, he opens his mouth. It's clear, Madam Vice President, that the policies you're advocating are nothing more than a dangerous path to socialism, a reckless disregard for the freedoms this nation was built upon. The room goes silent. His words slice through the air like a blade. It's not just an argument, it's an accusation, and the weight of it hangs heavy in the chamber. The cameras zoom in, capturing every flinch, every shift in body language. He leans back in his chair, a smug smile tugging at the corners of his lips, knowing he's just thrown the first punch. But Kamala doesn't flinch. She remains unshaken, the calm at the center of the storm. The camera zooms in on her face, the slight narrowing of her eyes, the steady exhale as she prepares to respond. The audience at home is on the edge of their seats. What will she say? How will she respond to such an incendiary accusation? Her hand rests on the desk, fingers poised but calm. She hasn't spoken yet, but everyone can feel the storm brewing. This isn't just a political debate, it's a reckoning. But what happened next left the entire nation in awe. The room remains tense, like a powder keg waiting for the smallest spark. The air feels thick, as if even the walls are holding their breath. Kamala Harris takes a moment, her gaze steady, unwavering. She knows this isn't just another debate. This is the moment. What's at stake is far more than policy or party lines. The future of America itself is on the table. The issue before them, whether it's healthcare, civil rights, or the very soul of the nation, is one that will determine not just the direction of policy but the values that will guide this country for generations to come. On the floor, Rand Paul's face has already flushed with indignation, his fists clenched on the desk in front of him as he watches Kamala. He can't seem to hold back the snide remarks, the relentless attacks that have defined his career. He leans in, his voice sharp, each word laced with contempt. You can stand there, Madam Vice President, and talk about fairness and equality all you want, but the reality is, your policies are designed to strip Americans of their rights. You're pushing them toward a system that's far more dangerous than anything we've ever seen. His voice rises, growing louder with every syllable. This isn't about helping people. It's about control. It's about power, and you're using it to rob the American people of their freedom. The room reacts, some gasp, some nod in agreement, others sit back, uncertain. But Kamala doesn't react. She's unmoved, and the longer she stays silent, the more agitated Paul becomes. With every passing second, he digs deeper, trying to rile her up, to make her lose her composure. You speak of equality, but what about the hard-working families who will bear the burden of your reckless policies? What about them? The ones you're promising to help while ignoring the destruction you're bringing down on the rest of the country? The audience feels the shift. This isn't about healthcare. This isn't just about ideology. This is about power, who controls the narrative, who gets to define what's true and just, who gets to dictate the future. The camera pans across the room, capturing the eyes of the senators, the media, the millions watching from their homes. Every eye is trained on this clash, as if the very fabric of American democracy hinges on the outcome of this moment. Kamala remains unfazed, her eyes locked on Paul, her posture as dignified as ever. She knows what he's trying to do. He's trying to provoke her, to turn this debate into a personal exchange. But Kamala knows that this moment is bigger than them both. She isn't here to play his game. She's here to define what's true. The stakes couldn't be higher. The weight of history presses down on them. This isn't just about who wins the argument. This is about who gets to shape the future narrative of America, the narrative of justice, equality, and fairness, or one of division, control, and fear. And then, in the silence that follows, as Paul paces and fumes, the room holds its breath, waiting for Kamala's response. What happens next won't just shape the debate, it will change the way Americans view truth and justice forever. Rand Paul's rise to political prominence has been marked by a series of calculated moves, carefully designed to position himself as a champion of freedom and limited government. But behind his polished rhetoric lies a history of contradictions, dismissals, and underhanded tactics that paint a far less flattering portrait. Born into the political spotlight as the son of libertarian icon Ron Paul, Rand's career has been defined by a fierce adherence to a narrow ideology, one that values personal freedom above all else, often to the detriment of others. From the moment he stepped into the political arena, he positioned himself as the anti-establishment candidate, railing against what he saw as the bloated, corrupt bureaucracy of Washington. But in his quest to dismantle government institutions, Rand Paul has routinely ignored or downplayed the struggles of those most in need of protection, the very people who rely on the systems he seeks to tear down. He made a name for himself early on with his outspoken opposition to the Affordable Care Act, labeling it a government takeover, and dismissing the millions of Americans who benefited from the law as casualties of a flawed system. His arguments were always framed in idealistic terms, rooted in a belief that the free market would solve all problems, never mind that millions of Americans would be left without the basic healthcare coverage they needed to survive. But his most infamous move came during his tenure in the Senate, where he routinely used his position to stall and obstruct legislation that could have improved the lives of countless citizens. His filibuster of the 2015 renewal of the Patriot Act, an effort to curtail government surveillance of Americans, was praised by his supporters as a courageous stand for liberty. But for many, it revealed his true nature, a man more interested in ideological purity than in finding common ground for the common good. And when it came to holding others accountable, Rand Paul was quick to dismiss criticism, quick to deflect any challenge to his ideas. In debates, he often brushed aside complex questions, choosing instead to make sweeping generalizations and half-baked arguments that appealed more to his base than to reasoned discourse. He would wave away inconvenient facts, claiming that they were liberal propaganda, or fake news, and instead pivot to a talking point that would make headlines. But there was always an undercurrent of arrogance in his delivery. The more he spoke, the more it became clear that Rand Paul didn't just believe in his own ideas, he believed that he was the one who should shape the future of America. He could bend the narrative to his will, silence his critics with calculated charm, and shift the conversation whenever it suited him. He projected the image of a man who knew exactly how the world worked, a man who had the answers, and those answers, in his mind, were irrefutable. But for all his bluster, Rand Paul had a blind spot. The very arrogance that fueled his rise also made him vulnerable. He underestimated his opponents, believing that his ability to manipulate the conversation would always be enough to carry the day. What he didn't account for, what he couldn't possibly have anticipated, was Kamala Harris. She had watched his career with growing concern. His speeches were always full of rhetorical flourishes, but his ideas rarely stood up to scrutiny. He never answered questions directly, deflecting with a clever turn of phrase or a dismissive wave of the hand. But Kamala wasn't one to be swayed by charm or slick rhetoric. She had dealt with the likes of him before, men who thought they could steamroll their opponents with arrogance and bravado, only to crumble when faced with someone who had the courage and clarity to expose them for what they truly were. As Rand Paul continued to build his narrative in the Senate chamber, relentlessly pushing his divisive agenda, he never imagined that Kamala Harris would be the one to finally call him out, to dismantle his lies and expose the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. But as the villain built his narrative, there was one thing he didn't account for: Kamala Harris's ability to dismantle lies with calm precision. Kamala Harris's journey to the Senate wasn't one of privilege or inherited power, it was one forged in the fires of struggle, ambition, and an unwavering commitment to justice. Born to immigrant parents, her mother, Shyamala, a cancer researcher from India, and her father, Donald, a Jamaican economist, Kamala grew up in a household that valued hard work, education, and, above all, equality. From an early age, she understood the weight of being an outsider, of living in spaces where her identity was often seen as other. But instead of retreating into the shadows, she used it as fuel to propel her forward. Her career began in law, where she earned her stripes as a prosecutor in San Francisco. Kamala didn't just fight for convictions, she fought for fairness. In a system often marked by inequality, she became known for taking on the tough cases, fighting against those who had the power to manipulate the system and, in doing so, punishing the most vulnerable. She wasn't interested in playing the game, she was determined to change it. Her rise through the ranks was a testament to her intelligence, poise, and determination. As the first woman of South Asian and African descent to be elected District Attorney of San Francisco, Kamala faced immense pressure, both from within the political establishment and from the communities she served. But she remained undeterred. Her work wasn't just about securing convictions, it was about ensuring that justice was served, that the powerless had a voice, and that truth was never sacrificed for convenience. Her transition to the Senate was equally groundbreaking, as Kamala became the first woman, first black woman, and first South Asian American to represent California. With each new role, she gained the respect of her colleagues, not because she played the game, but because she understood the stakes. She wasn't there to climb the political ladder, she was there to bring about change. And she understood that to do so, she would have to fight with every tool at her disposal, intelligence, compassion, and, above all, truth. Kamala was often called the relentless senator, a moniker she wore with pride. She didn't back down from tough questions, and she didn't let people off the hook when they skirted around accountability. Her ability to navigate complex issues with grace and clarity made her a force to be reckoned with. Her opponents often underestimated her, they saw her calm, composed exterior and assumed she was too polite to go for the jugular. But they were wrong. What they didn't realize was that Kamala Harris didn't need to shout to be heard. Her silence, calm, measured, and deliberate, was often her most powerful weapon. She had learned that the truth didn't need to be shouted, it simply needed to be revealed. And she was a master at peeling back the layers of deception, at making the uncomfortable truths impossible to ignore. But what made her uniquely prepared for this moment wasn't just her intelligence or experience. It was her deep, unshakable belief in the core values that made America what it is: liberty, justice, equality. Kamala knew that the work she was doing in the Senate wasn't just about passing laws, it was about defending the very soul of American democracy. She wasn't just debating policy, she was standing guard over the ideals that made this country a beacon for the world. The country had watched her rise, and now, in this moment, they were about to witness something even more significant. Kamala Harris wasn't just another politician, another voice in the echo chamber of partisan debates. She was something more. She was the embodiment of the nation's conscience, a living, breathing reminder of the values America was supposed to represent. As Rand Paul continued to hurl accusations and half-baked arguments, Kamala remained unshaken, her mind clear and focused. This wasn't about him, it wasn't even about her. This was about the future of the nation, about ensuring that truth, justice, and equality would always rise above the noise of division and deceit. Kamala Harris wasn't just another voice in a political debate. She was the voice of a better future. She was defending the very heart of the American dream, and she knew what was at stake. In this battle, there was no room for half-truths or fear-mongering. She was there to reveal the truth, and to ensure that the ideals of justice and equality would never be silenced again. Kamala wasn't just a politician. She was the embodiment of the nation's conscience, and she knew what was at stake. The back and forth in the Senate chamber grows more heated by the second. Rand Paul, his voice rising with each word, leans forward, determined to make his point with an almost manic intensity. His hands slam against the desk in front of him, the noise echoing in the silence. The crowd watches as the verbal sparring escalates, each insult more personal, more pointed than the last. You claim to stand for justice, Kamala, but you don't understand the basic principles of freedom. Paul spits, his eyes narrowing. Your policies are nothing more than a thinly veiled attempt to control the people, to take away their liberties in the name of some misguided equality. He sneers, his voice laced with disdain. You and your so-called progressive agenda want nothing more than to strip Americans of their hard-earned rights. You're playing politics with people's lives, and it's despicable. There's a murmur of disapproval from some of the senators, but Paul doesn't stop. He's on a roll now, and he's feeding off the adrenaline, the crowd, the sense that he's in the midst of a showdown. His words grow sharper, more venomous, as he paints Kamala as an enemy of the American people, someone who would undermine everything this country stands for. Kamala remains eerily calm. Her posture doesn't shift. Her gaze never wavers from Paul, though the entire room can feel the tension rising. She doesn't react to his accusations. She doesn't even flinch. The silence around her is deafening. The cameras zoom in on her face, capturing the unbroken calmness that sets her apart from the frenzy unfolding across the room. On the other side of the chamber, the audience is split. Some watch in shock as Paul throws out insult after insult. His attacks are biting, relentless, and personal, like a man desperately trying to tear down the person standing in front of him. Others, however, are watching Kamala, waiting. Her silence is unnerving, but it's also magnetic. They sense something in her composure, something they can't quite put their finger on yet. The anticipation in the room thickens as it becomes clear, Kamala Harris isn't just going to fight back with words. She's playing a much bigger game. Rand Paul's breathing quickens as he realizes that his attacks aren't landing the way he expects. His frustration is beginning to show. His words, once calculated, are becoming erratic. You sit there, pretending to care about the American people, when all you care about is pushing your own agenda. You don't want to hear the truth, because the truth doesn't fit into your narrative. His voice cracks, but he presses on. You can't hide behind your position forever. People are starting to see through your lies. Each word is like a hammer, pounding at the atmosphere, and yet Kamala doesn't respond. Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, seem to be cutting right through him. The contrast couldn't be more stark, his voice growing more desperate, more shrill, while she remains poised, unflinching, the very picture of unbreakable resolve. The crowd is uneasy now. Whispers ripple through the Senate floor as Paul's attacks grow more unhinged. Some senators are visibly uncomfortable, but the tension is palpable in the room. They're no longer just watching a debate, they're witnessing something much larger, an emotional tug-of-war, a battle of wills between a man whose arrogance has pushed him into overdrive and a woman whose dignity is holding the line. Kamala knows exactly what she's doing. She's waiting. She's waiting for the exact right moment to strike, not in rage, but with precision. She has all the time in the world. And as Paul continues to rage, she remains the calm in the storm, the embodiment of control. But there's something happening under the surface. Paul's fury is beginning to crack his facade. His arrogance, once a shield, is now a liability. He knows, deep down, that the longer Kamala stays silent, the more she holds the power. Every second that passes, every unspoken word, chips away at the illusion of control he's clinging to. As Paul grows more frantic, Kamala's silence becomes deafening. What would she say next? The room waits, holding its breath, as the fate of the debate, and possibly the future, hinges on the response that's coming. The Senate chamber is heavy with anticipation. The atmosphere is thick with the sound of Rand Paul's quickened breathing, his chest rising and falling as if each word has drained him of all energy. The rest of the room remains taut, the senators on edge, holding their breath. Kamala Harris sits poised at the center, the calm before the storm, her hands steady on the desk in front of her. For a long moment, the room is still. All eyes are on Kamala. She has not said a word since Paul's barrage of insults, but her presence has become a force in itself. The silence stretches, almost unbearably long. And then, finally, Kamala Harris speaks. Her voice is steady, unhurried, every word calculated and precise. Senator Paul, she begins, her tone measured, you've made many claims today, claims about freedom, about equality, about liberty, but let's break them down one by one, shall we? There's a murmur in the chamber, a ripple of movement as people lean forward, sensing what's about to happen. Rand Paul's face tightens, his hands gripping the edge of the desk as if he's bracing for impact. But he can't hide the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Kamala continues, her voice a calm, unstoppable force. You say my policies are about control, about stripping away freedom. But let's talk about what freedom really is. Is freedom the right to access healthcare, to live without the fear of losing your home, your family, your future? Or is freedom about the ability of a few powerful people to hoard wealth, to deny others the basic dignity of living without fear? Each word she speaks is carefully measured, as if she's slicing through Rand Paul's argument with surgical precision. The tension in the room grows with each pause, every phrase hanging in the air like a weight, forcing the audience to confront the uncomfortable truths they'd rather ignore. Kamala turns her attention to the heart of Paul's argument, the one about government overreach. You claim that my policies, the ones I advocate for, are a dangerous path to socialism. But let's be clear, Senator, socialism is not the desire to provide every American with the opportunity to live a healthy, dignified life. Socialism is not ensuring that people don't have to choose between paying for medicine or putting food on the table. What you're really fighting against is not socialism, what you're fighting against is compassion. The idea that we, as a society, are responsible for each other. Rand Paul shifts in his seat, his jaw tightens, but he doesn't interrupt. He knows this is coming. He can feel it. Kamala's voice becomes more resolute, every word a carefully calculated rebuttal, each one more powerful than the last. You argue that we should let the market solve our problems, but the truth is, Senator, the market doesn't care about people. The market doesn't care about your healthcare, your education, your security. The market cares about profits. And as long as you continue to champion this market-first ideology, people will suffer. People will die. And that, Senator, is a moral failure. The system you so fervently defend leaves too many behind. She leans forward slightly, her eyes locking with his, and the room grows even quieter. So let's not pretend that this debate is about freedom. This debate is about who we choose to serve. Do we serve the people, or do we serve the interests of the few at the top? The audience shifts again, some senators exchanging looks, others simply nodding, as if the weight of her words is sinking in. Kamala's gaze never leaves Paul, her conviction unwavering. She's not just speaking to him, she's speaking to the entire country, to the world. She's laying down a challenge to the very essence of what it means to lead. And then, in one final, devastating blow, Kamala Harris delivers her mic drop moment, the words that will forever define the debate. You see, Senator, you want to talk about freedom, but what you really want is the freedom to ignore the suffering of others. You want the freedom to disregard the lives of millions of people who are struggling every day to make ends meet, to fight for their basic rights. You want the freedom to act as if they don't matter. There's a long pause. The tension in the room is so thick it feels like it could snap. Rand Paul's eyes widen, the color draining from his face. His lips tremble, but the words he wants to say get caught in his throat. The smug confidence that once defined him now seems like a distant memory, replaced by something far less certain. Kamala stands, her voice cool and unshaken, her words hanging in the air like a challenge. The truth is, Senator, your policies aren't about freedom. They're about fear. Fear of losing power, fear of change, and fear of the people you've left behind. The chamber falls into complete silence. No one dares to speak, not even a breath, as the weight of her words settles over them. The camera pans across the room, capturing the stunned faces of her colleagues, the senators who can barely believe what they've just heard. Paul sits frozen, unable to form a response, the room now fully aware of the depth of his defeat. And as Rand Paul struggled for words, the Senate chamber witnessed something that could never be unseen: truth had prevailed. The second Kamala Harris finishes her final words, the room stands still, suspended in the weight of what just transpired. For a moment, there's only silence, but it's not just any silence, it's the kind of silence that rings in your ears. The entire chamber, the millions watching from around the world, are caught in a collective breath, suspended in disbelief at the power of what they've just witnessed. Then, in a sudden rush, it all explodes. Social media detonates. Within seconds, clips from Kamala's mic drop moment flood Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Hashtags like #TruthWins, #Kamala takes the lead, and #The Truth Is Out are trending worldwide. Thousands of tweets fly across the digital landscape, each one more impassioned than the last. Memes start circulating almost immediately, Kamala's calm, composed demeanor juxtaposed with Paul's flustered frustration. The internet, with its insatiable thirst for drama, cannot get enough of the moment. Celebrities and influencers chime in. Actress and activist Yara Shahidi tweets, "Kamala Harris just proved what leadership looks like. A true force for justice." The tweet goes viral within minutes, with thousands of retweets and replies, many of them echoing the same sentiment. Others follow, Ava DuVernay, Don Cheadle, Mark Ruffalo, all vocal in their praise of Kamala's deft handling of the debate. But it's not just celebrities who are weighing in. The political commentary comes fast and hard. Pundits on both sides of the aisle are in shock, many of them revisiting their preconceived notions about Kamala. This wasn't just a debate performance, CNN's Jake Tapper states on air. This was a masterclass in politics. Kamala Harris didn't just rebut Rand Paul's arguments, she dismantled them with surgical precision. On Fox News, conservative commentator Tucker Carlson shifts uncomfortably in his seat, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I didn't agree with her policies, but what you saw in that moment was raw political power. She took him apart without breaking a sweat." Even his colleagues, who have relentlessly attacked her in the past, can't help but concede her victory. Meanwhile, political analysts are quick to highlight the cultural shift sparked by her words. For the first time, a woman of color, stood at the forefront of the national conversation with unwavering strength and clarity, delivering truth in a way that transcended partisan lines. The narrative of Kamala's rise was no longer just about her achievements, it was about her embodiment of the very ideals the nation claims to uphold. The coverage snowballs. Editorials pour in. The New York Times, The Washington Post, and NPR release pieces examining the historical significance of her performance. Kamala Harris's statement today was more than just political rhetoric, writes the Post. It was a cultural reckoning, a moment where the ideals of justice, equality, and freedom were not just defended, but redefined. Kamala's words echo through every corner of public discourse. The debate becomes the subject of endless discussions in living rooms, online forums, and classrooms across America. Ordinary citizens, immigrants, students, working families, begin to feel a shift in the political air. Her victory feels like more than just a moment in a debate, it feels like the beginning of something bigger. Public opinion starts to sway in Kamala's favor. Polls show an immediate spike in approval for her leadership, particularly among younger, progressive voters. The energy around her is palpable. Social media posts flood in, with people sharing personal stories about how Kamala's words made them feel seen, heard, and validated. One tweet from a young immigrant woman in Los Angeles garners thousands of likes. "Kamala Harris spoke for me today. She didn't just win the debate. She won the future." Political insiders begin to whisper about her rising influence. Her counterattack on Paul is not just seen as a victory in a debate, it's a defining moment of her political career. She has taken control of the narrative in a way no one saw coming, and in doing so, has solidified her place as a leader for the people, someone who will not back down, not compromise on truth, and certainly not allow the powerful to dictate the terms of justice. But even as the debate ended, something far bigger had begun. Kamala Harris had not just won a battle in a political war. She had captured the hearts and minds of a nation hungry for truth. Her message, her courage, her clarity, they had become the rallying cry of a new generation of Americans determined to push back against the forces of division, fear, and inequality. As the world began to absorb the aftermath, one question lingered in the air: what would this moment mean for the future of American politics? Could this be the beginning of a new era, one where truth and justice aren't just ideals, but the foundation upon which the future is built? Kamala Harris had set a new standard. And the world was watching, waiting to see how far she would go. The Senate chamber is still vibrating with the aftershocks of Kamala's devastating rebuttal. The moment of raw truth, the silent pause, and the quiet surrender of Rand Paul have set the stage for something greater, something far more profound than just a political debate. Kamala Harris stands tall, composed, but her eyes are no longer locked on Paul. She's turned toward the rest of the room, the country, the world, her audience now far bigger than the senators who occupy the chamber. With a calm that commands attention, she speaks once more, her voice clear and unwavering. Senator Paul may have tried to twist the truth today, but we cannot let that pass without response. This isn't just about political theater or the clash of ideologies, she begins, her words cutting through the tension. What we witnessed today was a fight for something much more fundamental: our integrity, our dignity, and our future. There's a steady strength in her voice, a quiet power that seems to wash over the room, shifting the entire dynamic. Kamala isn't just speaking to Paul anymore, she's speaking to the American people, to every person who has ever been told that their voice didn't matter, that their struggles were too small to care about. The truth, she continues, is that our country was built on the belief that all people are created equal, that justice must be blind, and that service to others is the highest calling. We cannot afford to let these ideals be twisted, to let them be undermined in the name of political gamesmanship. The room listens intently, the weight of her words settling into the minds of all who hear them. Kamala is reframing the entire debate. What began as a war of words over policy has now become a war for the soul of the nation. She's turning the battle into a moral reckoning, and it's not just about who wins or loses, it's about the principles that will guide the future. This is not about whether we agree on every policy, Senator. It's about understanding what our service to this country truly means, Kamala says, her voice gaining momentum. It's about the dignity of every single person, the worker, the student, the mother, the father, the immigrant, the child, and how we, as leaders, are entrusted with the sacred responsibility of ensuring that they are heard, that they are protected, and that they are given the opportunity to thrive. And that means putting the needs of people before the needs of power. It means rejecting fear, rejecting division, and choosing instead to fight for what is just. There's a shift now, a palpable change in the room. Senators, who had once been divided, are now united in a quiet, collective understanding. The weight of her words is too much to ignore. Kamala's message isn't just a personal victory, it's a collective call to action for every citizen, every leader, to embrace the values of integrity, truth, and service. Today, we've seen what happens when we choose dignity over division, Kamala concludes, her voice firm, unwavering, and filled with hope. What we've witnessed today is not just a victory in this chamber, it's a victory for every person who believes that justice is not just a dream, but a reality we must fight for, every day. As she speaks, the room begins to stir. There's a quiet murmur, a ripple of understanding and recognition. Kamala Harris has done more than just win a debate. She has set a new standard for leadership. She has shown the world what it means to lead with integrity, to stand firm in the face of personal attacks, and to never, ever compromise on the truth. The tension that once filled the chamber now gives way to something else, something more profound. It's a sense of collective purpose, an understanding that this moment is bigger than any political game. It's about doing what's right, no matter the odds. Kamala stands there, her presence a beacon of hope and moral clarity. So I ask you, all of you, she says, her eyes sweeping over the room, to carry this moment with you. Carry it into your communities, into your workplaces, into your homes. Stand up for what is right. Speak out when you see injustice. Let your actions, your words, your very lives reflect the values we've fought so hard to uphold. The audience is breathless, and for a moment, it feels as though the entire nation is holding its breath with her. In that moment, it wasn't just a debate, it was a reminder: justice always prevails, even when the odds seem impossible. The truth has a way of cutting through the noise, and no amount of power or politics can ever silence it. Kamala Harris had shown them all what true leadership looks like, and it wasn't about winning at any cost. It was about serving with honor, fighting for dignity, and never losing sight of the truth. Kamala Harris's victory today was more than just a moment in a political debate, it was a statement to the world: truth, dignity, and justice always triumph over fear, division, and deceit. What we witnessed was a reminder of the power we all have when we stand firm in our values, when we choose to fight for what is right, no matter the odds. This moment didn't just reshape the debate, it reshaped the conversation. It reminded us all that the soul of this nation is defined by our commitment to each other, to fairness, and to truth. Kamala didn't just defeat an opponent, she ignited a movement for justice, equality, and service over self-interest. But this moment doesn't end here. It's just the beginning. If you believe in standing up for what's right, if you believe that the truth must always prevail, then now is your time to act. Don't just watch as a bystander, be part of the change. Share this message, stand up in your communities, and continue fighting for a future where dignity is upheld, where justice isn't negotiable, and where truth will always win the day. If you're ready to be part of something bigger, something that truly matters, then join us. Subscribe to this channel, share this moment with the world, and together, let's build a future where truth and justice aren't just ideals, they're our reality. This is your movement. This is our movement. Let's make history together.